Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, those who are friends and followers of Islam. Did you know that Allah sends us signs through every moment of our life to guide us, enlighten us, and bring us closer to Him? If you feel this deep connection in your heart, this video is for you. We will explore together how to recognize and respond to these signs to live a life full of peace, blessings, and closeness to the Creator. Don't miss this chance to transform your faith and your daily life. Subscribe, share this video with your loved ones, and let us grow together in the light of Allah. 1. Divine signs and their meaning. In daily life, we are constantly surrounded by signs, small and large manifestations that call us to reflection. But, more than a simple sequence of events, these signs have a deep spiritual meaning. According to the Muslim faith, Allah, in His infinite wisdom, guides us through signs that He places in our lives to remind us of His presence, orient us, and teach us essential lessons. These signs can come in various forms and can be felt in our hearts, in our thoughts, and even in our actions. Knowing how to recognize them is a gift, a spiritual journey that strengthens the connection with God. The diversity of Allah's signs from Allah can be as subtle as everyday events and as powerful as a deep spiritual experience. In the Quran, God invites us to observe the wonders of creation as clear signs of His greatness. The heavens, the earth, the mountains, the oceans, and even living creatures are silent witnesses of the divine presence. The Quran says, "In the creation of the heavens and the earth, in the succession of night and day, there are indeed signs for those gifted with understanding." Al-Imran 3:190. These natural elements are often the first signs that attract our attention. The majestic mountains, the stars that shine in the night, the beauty of a sunset, can all be seen as reminders of the greatness of God. But these signs are not just limited to nature. They also manifest in our lives in more personal ways. Daily life events as signs, divine signs, are not limited to grandiose phenomena. They can also be hidden in the simple events of daily life. A comforting word from a friend, a chance meeting with a person who inspires you, or a message heard on the radio that resonates deeply with the situation you find yourself in. All of these events can be seen as signs from Allah. Sometimes, a small detail can change our perspective on a situation, leading us to realize that everything is ordained by divine will. These signs, although seemingly mundane, are ways in which God communicates with us and guides us to a better path. Trials as signs of purification and growth. The difficulties and trials we encounter in life are also signs from Allah, but often they are perceived differently. Many people view challenges as misfortunes or punishments, but in the Islamic context, trials are also seen as means of spiritual purification and elevation. The Quran reminds us that every difficulty, no matter how difficult, has a purpose and a hidden meaning. We impose on a soul only according to its capacity. Al-Baqarah 2:286. When we go through periods of suffering, loss, or discouragement, these trials can become signs from Allah that help us purify our hearts and strengthen our faith. These difficult times are also opportunities for us to reflect on our own relationship with God, to reevaluate our actions, and to seek to return to Him with humility and sincerity. Encounters and people as divine signs. Sometimes signs from Allah take the form of people we meet on our path. These encounters, which seem fortuitous, can have a profound influence on our lives. A mentor who guides you in a time of doubt, a loved one who supports you in a time of crisis, or even a stranger whose words touch you deeply. All of these individuals can be instruments through which God shows us His direction. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "A man is the friend of what he loves." In this sense, Meeting a person who shares your values or who pushes you to think can be a sign that you are on the right path. Every human interaction can be an opportunity to grow spiritually, provided we remain attentive to the lessons it brings us. Human relationships, although imperfect, are another form of divine communication. Sometimes the presence or absence of a person in our life is a message in itself. Maybe the person you meet has a role to play in your spiritual journey, or maybe their absence causes you to seek God. Emotions and intuitions as personal signs. Beyond external events, there are also more interior, subtle, and personal signs. The emotions and intuitions we feel at any given moment can be direct indications of divine will. For example, a feeling of inner peace or tranquility in a situation that might otherwise be stressful can be a sign that we are on the right path. Conversely, a persistent feeling of unease or anxiety could indicate that an action or decision is not in harmony with our inner truth and the will of Allah. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "Faith is a light in the heart." This inner light, or spiritual intuition, is a sign that we must learn to recognize and respect. Sometimes, an inexplicable feeling can guide our choices and protect us from potential mistakes. This is often called inner divine guidance, the need for reflection and attention. Ultimately, to understand and recognize these signs from Allah, it is essential to cultivate deep attention and sincere reflection. It is not enough to simply be passive in the face of life. We must be active in our spiritual quest, attentive to the smallest details and receptive to the messages hidden behind each event. Regular prayer, meditation on the verses of the Quran, and self-reflection are practices that help us sharpen this perception of divine signs. Recognizing these signs in our daily lives is a way to get closer to Allah, to better understand our place in the world, and to follow a path of light and wisdom. Each sign, each encounter, each trial can become an open door to a deeper understanding of our faith and our existence. Thus, divine signs are not only external events, they are also an inner invitation to contemplation, spiritual awakening, and the quest for meaning. They are, above all, a message from Allah to remind us that He is present in every moment, guiding us through the flow of life. 2. The receptivity of the heart to signs. In spiritual life, just as in everyday life, it is not enough just for the signs to appear. Their impact and transformative power depend greatly on our receptivity, our ability to perceive and respond to them sincerely. The signs of Allah are constantly present around us, but to see them, hear them, and feel them deeply in our heart, we must first be receptive. You must have an open heart, a calm mind, and a faith that allows you to recognize divine guidance in every moment. The importance of a pure heart to perceive the signs. The heart is at the center of spiritual experience in Islam. The Quran teaches us that it is not simply sight or hearing that can be instruments of spiritual perception, but also the heart, which plays a fundamental role in understanding signs. God says in the Quran, "Surely it is not their eyes that are blind, but it is the hearts that are in their breasts that are blind." Al-Hajj 22:46. This means that it is not a matter of physical perception, but rather of spiritual perception, which depends on the state of our heart. If our heart is filled with anger, hatred, or doubts, it becomes difficult to see divine signs. Passions of the heart can obscure our ability to receive the light of divine guidance. Thus, to be receptive to the signs of Allah, it is essential to purify our heart. This requires inner work, a constant effort to get rid of elements harmful to spiritual clarity. Purification of the heart involves humility, sincere repentance, and the quest for inner peace. When we pray sincerely, when we seek to purify our intentions, And when we make efforts to overcome our weaknesses, we make our hearts more capable of perceiving the divine light which manifests itself in the form of signs. Tranquility of the heart, a prerequisite for receptivity. Another essential aspect of receptivity is inner tranquility. In a world where hustle and bustle, noise and distractions are omnipresent, it is easy to lose connection with ourselves and with God. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "There is a piece of flesh in the body of man, and if it is pure, the whole body is pure. But if it is corrupt, the whole body is." Sahih al-Bukhari. This piece of flesh is the heart. It is the central element of our being, the one most likely to be disrupted by the tumults of the outside world. To perceive the signs of Allah, the heart must be calm, quiet, and open. He must be freed from pride, envy, stress, and material concerns. This inner calm allows us to better hear the subtle voice of divine guidance. When our heart is at peace, we are able to better understand the messages that come to us, whether in the form of external signs or in the form of internal intuitions. Regular prayers, times of spiritual meditation, and the practice of dhikr, remembrance of God, are ways in which we cultivate this tranquility of the heart. Each act of devotion is an opportunity to refocus our being and prepare ourselves to welcome divine signs. Faith as the key to perceiving the signs. Another fundamental element of receptivity to the signs of Allah is faith. Faith is not simply an abstract or theoretical belief, but a deep conviction that guides our view of the world. When we have strong faith, when we sincerely believe that God is always there to guide and support us, we become more attentive to the signs He places before us. Faith is a light in the heart, a light that helps us see what is invisible to material eyes. The Quran reminds us that those who have faith in God are better able to perceive the signs around them. God says in the Quran, "And those who believe and do righteous deeds, we will certainly bring them into gardens under which streams flow, and whatever malice they have in their hearts, we will remove it." Al-A'raf 743. This means that faith purifies our heart and makes it more receptive to divine guidance. By having faith that each event, each encounter, each difficult or joyful moment is a sign of the presence of Allah, we learn to see things from another angle. We begin to see signs not as coincidences or accidents of life, but as divine messages. Faith transforms the way we interact with the world and makes us more aware of the signs around us. The importance of patience and reflection. Receptivity to the signs of Allah does not only occur in the speed of events. Sometimes the signs come to us slowly, and we have to be patient to understand them. Patience is an essential virtue in the spiritual life, because it allows us to navigate periods of uncertainty with calm and wisdom. In the present moment, we may not always understand the reasons behind certain events, but by practicing patience and having faith that everything has a divine purpose, we open the door to greater understanding in the future. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, emphasized the importance of patience when he said, "Patience is a light." Sahih Muslim. This means that patience helps us shine a light into the darkness of uncertainty and see the signs sent to us. By being patient, we also allow ourselves to reflect on what is happening around us and identify the signs in each situation. Reflection is crucial. It helps us step back and examine events from a more spiritual perspective. Inner listening, intuition, and divine guidance. Sometimes the signs don't come in an obvious or outward way. They manifest themselves in the form of an inner intuition, a sudden inspiration, or an impression that cannot be explained by reason. These moments can be especially difficult to identify if we are not used to listening to our heart. Intuition is this inner voice that guides us and advises us in our choices. The Prophet Muhammad,
peace and blessings be upon him, said, "The believer is the one whose heart is illuminated by the light of faith." Sahih al-Bukhari. This inner light, often referred to as divine intuition, is a form of sign that God sends us to guide us. When we listen to this inner voice with deep faith, we become more receptive to the subtle signs and hidden messages in our lives. Prepare to receive divine signs. Receptivity to Allah's signs depends on our ability to purify our hearts, cultivate inner tranquility, strengthen our faith, and be patient and thoughtful. Every action we take to make our hearts purer and our minds calmer prepares us to receive divine guidance. The signs are constantly around us, but it is up to us to create the conditions necessary to perceive them. Through prayer, dhikr, patience, and faith, we open ourselves to a spiritual world rich in divine messages that can transform our lives and bring us closer to Allah. 3. The responsibility of recognizing these signs. When we talk about divine signs, it is not just about perceiving them, but also about understanding our responsibility towards them. God, in His infinite mercy, sends us signs to guide us, enlighten us, and help us take a more righteous path. But these signs are not there just to be passively observed. Once we recognize these signs, it becomes our duty to respond to this divine call. It involves making conscious choices, taking appropriate actions, and following the path laid out for us by God. Signs as a call to action. Recognizing a divine sign is not an end in itself, but a beginning. God gives us signs not only so that they touch our hearts, but so that they have a tangible impact on our actions and decisions. For example, if we meet a person in need and feel a surge of compassion towards them, this feeling can be interpreted as a sign from Allah to act. Ignoring this impulse or failing to respond appropriately to this call can mean neglecting the opportunity to act in accordance with divine will. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "Islam is a religion of practice, not a religion of words only." This principle reflects the idea that it is not enough to recognize a sign, but also to act accordingly. If a sign prompts us to do a good deed, to help someone, or to change our behavior, we have a responsibility to respond to that call. Turning away from a divine sign out of indifference or procrastination is a neglect of the divine guidance offered to us. The importance of informed decision-making. The signs of Allah are not limited to obvious events. Sometimes they hide in more subtle moments, in dilemmas or complex situations where we have to make important decisions. Our responsibility here is to listen deeply to our hearts and pray for God to guide us to the best option. Recognition of divine signs is not only through external manifestations, but also through introspection and reflection on what is morally and spiritually right. Informed decision-making is a key aspect of spiritual responsibility. In the Quran, God teaches us that divine guidance is given to those who actively seek it. And when they are called to Allah and His Messenger to judge between them, this is what the believers say: "We have heard and we have obeyed. To Allah will be the return." An-Nur 24:51. This verse shows that believers are those who, when faced with an important decision, seek divine guidance and agree to follow what God commands them. Commitment to following God's path. Recognizing the signs of Allah also requires a commitment to following God's path, even when it becomes difficult or unpopular. It is easy to follow society's path or give in to external pressure, but divine signs call us to behavior that transcends worldly norms. Sometimes, following the signs of Allah requires resisting temptations, making sacrifices, or adopting a lifestyle that is not in line with social expectations. This involves showing spiritual courage. The Quran often recounts the stories of prophets and believers who faced difficult challenges after recognizing the signs of Allah. For example, Prophet Abraham, who recognized divine signs and obeyed God by defying King Nimrod despite persecution and dangers. This commitment to following God's way, even in adversity, is a responsibility that every believer must be willing to assume when they recognize the signs of God in their lives. Responsibility towards others. Recognition of divine signs is not limited to our own spiritual journey. It also calls us to act responsibly towards others. Once we recognize a sign from God, we often have a collective responsibility. For example, if we understand that a sign from Allah invites us to show generosity or compassion, we have a responsibility to spread this quality in our interactions with others. Helping our neighbors, sharing our resources, and defending justice are actions that flow naturally from recognizing divine signs. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "The best among you is the one who is most useful to others." These words remind us that our spiritual commitment must not remain isolated. When we recognize a sign from God, we must also ensure that our behavior benefits those around us. Divine signs can sometimes guide us towards actions of solidarity and mutual aid, and we have the responsibility not to ignore these calls. Moral responsibility in the fulfillment of religious duties. Recognizing a sign from Allah also implies taking responsibility in fulfilling our religious duties. This includes prayer, fasting, zakat, and other spiritual obligations. Every time we face a moral choice, a sign from Allah calls us to act according to the principles of faith, whether in our daily interactions, in our work, or in our relationships with others.
Divine signs, whether they appear in the form of trials or blessings, remind us of the responsibility we have to maintain our religious practices with rigor and sincerity. Prayer, for example, is not just a formality, but an act of submission and gratitude to God. Recognizing that every prayer is a sign of His mercy and an opportunity to purify our soul becomes an act of responsibility to God. Awareness of spiritual consequences. Another aspect of the responsibility to recognize divine signs is awareness of the spiritual consequences of our actions. Every decision we make, every sign we ignore or choose not to follow, impacts our relationship with God. The Quran teaches us that every act of deviation or forgetting can lead to distance from divine guidance. Whoever turns away from my reminder will have a life full of anguish. Taha 2124. This reminds us that our responsibility is not only to recognize the signs, but also to respond to the divine call with seriousness and commitment. We must be aware of the impact of our choices and actions, not only on our earthly life, but also on our eternal salvation. Ignoring divine signs, living in indifference or giving in to our personal desires can lead us astray and away from the mercy of Allah. The need for continuous self-assessment. Recognizing the signs of Allah and responding to them responsibly requires continuous self-assessment. It is crucial to take the time to regularly reflect on our actions, to ask ourselves if we are acting in accordance with divine guidance, and if we are responding appropriately to the signs we receive. This regular introspection is essential to growing spiritually and staying on the right path. In the Quran, Allah reminds us of the need to purify and reform ourselves by saying, "And do not kill yourselves. Surely Allah is merciful to you." An-Nisa 429. This encourages us not to go astray and to always seek to improve our spiritual state, to recognize our errors and to correct our behavior, to be in harmony with the will of Allah. Recognizing and responding to divine signs requires constant responsibility, not only to ourselves, but also to others and to God. This journey is not simple, but it is essential to leading a life full of meaning, wisdom, and closeness to the Creator. The blessings of responding to divine signs. When we respond sincerely and committedly to the signs of Allah, the resulting blessings are not just immediate rewards, but profound transformations of our soul and our relationship with the Creator. Each act of submission, each gesture of gratitude towards God, when performed in response to a divine sign, generates a series of spiritual and material blessings. These blessings are a manifestation of Allah's infinite mercy and grace, and they touch every aspect of our lives. Lasting inner peace. One of the greatest benefits of responding to Allah's signs is the inner peace that results. When we recognize a divine sign and act according to God's will, our heart becomes calm. The certainty that we act according to divine guidance brings unparalleled tranquility, an inner serenity that transcends the external upheavals of life. The Quran tells us, "Those who believe and whose hearts are at peace when they remember Allah." Is it not that when they remember Allah, their hearts are at rest? Ar-Ra'd 13:28. Responding to divine signs is an act of faith, and this faith leads to peace of mind and a feeling of security. When we follow God's path, we find a form of peace that often eludes those who seek to satisfy their material desires or follow the ways of the world. This peace is not linked to external circumstances, but to an internal state of submission and confidence in the will of Allah. Reinforced guidance, responding to Allah's signs, is also a way of attracting more divine guidance. When we act in accordance with the signs, we become closer to Allah, and He guides us further towards the right path. It is a spiritual dynamic where each devotional action draws additional light into our lives, helping us to see the next signs more clearly and make more righteous decisions. The Quran tells us, "And those who have believed and done righteous deeds, we will guide them, because of their faith, into paths that lead to happiness." Al-Jathiyah 45:43. Thus, by responding positively to the signs of Allah, we allow our faith to grow and our understanding to strengthen. The relationship with God becomes more and more fluid and filled with light. Responding to a sign from Allah opens the way to other blessings and guides our hearts towards greater spiritual clarity. Divine protection against trials. Another great blessing that comes from responding to Allah's signs is divine protection. By following the divine signs, we place ourselves under the protection of Allah, who protects us from the dangers and trials that could arise in our life. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "When you follow the path of Allah, He will protect you from the evil of this world and the hereafter." This protection is not only physical, but also spiritual. We may face challenges, but by responding to Allah's signs, we find the strength to overcome these trials with patience and faith. The peace of mind that accompanies submission to divine will means that even in times of difficulty, we remain serene and confident, knowing that each trial has a purpose and that God will protect us from it. Material and spiritual blessings. Responding to Allah's signs also brings material blessings. Although faith is not based on material gains, God often rewards us in tangible ways when He sees that we have followed His guidance. These material blessings are not necessarily material goods, but may include greater prosperity in our endeavors, family stability, or success in our legal and ethical endeavors. God tells us in the Quran, "And if you are grateful, I will grant you more." Ibrahim 14:7. Responding to divine guidance also generates spiritual wholeness. The satisfaction we feel in performing an act of kindness or a prayer in response to a divine sign nourishes the soul. Every act of devotion becomes a source of reward, not only in this life, but also in the hereafter, where God grants us a place close to Him as a reward for our sincere efforts. Spiritual blessings are priceless. They strengthen our faith and continually bring us closer to Allah.
the love of Allah in our hearts. Finally, one of the deepest blessings of responding to divine signs is the love that Allah instills in our hearts. When we respond to Allah's signs, our hearts become tenderer and more inclined to love our Creator and His creations. The love of Allah is the source of all good in this life and the hereafter. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "There are three things in which he who has them has true faith: loving Allah and His Messenger more than anything else, loving his brother for Allah, and being firmly attached to the faith." This love, nourished by responding to divine signs, becomes the driving force of our spiritual quest and leads us to a life filled with inestimable blessings. Allah's signs are manifestations of His mercy, and how we respond to these signs determines our spiritual journey. Each sign is an opportunity to get closer to Allah, to act according to His will, and to receive His blessings. Responding to these signs with sincerity, faith, and devotion brings us inner peace, continued guidance, divine protection, and blessings both material and spiritual. It is through this continuous interaction with the signs of Allah that we strengthen our faith, purify ourselves, and grow spiritually. The response to these signs is a conscious approach that leads us to a richer, more fulfilling life, and closer to our Creator. O Allah, You are the guide, the clement, the merciful. We ask You, by Your infinite grace, to open our eyes to recognize Your signs in our lives. We implore You to purify our hearts, to grant us the wisdom to understand and respond to Your divine calls with sincerity and humility. Make every trial we encounter an opportunity to draw closer to You and strengthen our faith. Guide us on the right path and grant us Your protection against the difficulties of this world and the hereafter. May our heart always remain able to receive Your light and guidance. O Allah, bless us with lasting inner peace. Grant us the strength to follow Your signs and ensure that we are instruments of benefit to those around us. Help us to respond to Your signs with gratitude and to recognize Your infinite goodness in every moment of our lives. Amen.